Today I will talk about my first experience as a contributor and also what is important to know when you want to contribute yourself. So a little bit about myself. I'm Nico De Cleyre and I work for Ordina, Belgium. I started 12 years ago as a backend developer in SharePoint 2010. Shortly after SPFX was introduced, I switched more to client-side development. This was a good reason for me to contribute to the open source project CLI for Microsoft 365, since I already developed in TypeScript for SharePoint Framework. So it was a small step to do development for the CLI, since these are also written in TypeScript. I'm also a competence center lead at Ordina, Belgium, and I also started blogging recently, so you can also find me on my blog. How it all started for me is actually at the Collab days in Belgium, where I met Milan Volemans and JC Wagenbaard. These two people were already active as a maintainer on the CLI for Microsoft 365. So at this event, we talked a bit on about CLI, and they got me triggered. So the day after Collab Days, I contacted them to ask how I could contribute to this amazing open source project. And they were able to explain me with great enthusiasm how you can start as a contributor on the CLI for Microsoft 365. So the first thing I did was make a separate fork. A fork is a new repository that shares code and visibility settings with our original upstream repository. On this fork, you can change things to your heart's content without breaking the actual upstream code. It is recommended that for each issue you do for the CLI for Microsoft 365 to create a separate bench for this. In this way, every issue you solve is protected in one separate bench. What also important is after you create your fork is to pull that fork locally. You do this by taking the link from your GitHub fork and cloning it locally with the command git clone, followed by the URL of the fork. Then with your command prompt, you can go to the folder where you cloned your fork and run the command npm install to install all the dependencies needed for the CLI for Microsoft 365. Of course, you need Node.js version 16 and Node package manager version 8. After you installed all the dependencies, you can run the command npm build to build the actual code. And finally, you run the command npm link. This last one is a important one if you want to start contributing, because with npm link, you create a reference to your local project. But be careful, because if you had already installed the CLI for Microsoft 365 globally, you must first uninstall it before you run npm link. Once these commands have been executed, you can use your local version when using the M365 command in your shell. But where do you actually start? When I looked at other open source projects, I always wondered how to get started. I always thought it was too difficult to contribute, that I wouldn't be able to successfully work out an issue. The CLI got you covered there. If you're just starting out as a contributor for the CLI, it is best to look at issues labeled good first issues. These issues are a little easier to start with, making the threshold lower. When you go to the GitHub repository for the CLI, you can create an overview with only the issues with the label good first issues. You can do that by clicking on the good first issue label next to an already existing issue, or you can filter it by clicking on the label column and selecting the good first issue label. Afterwards, you can scroll to the list and see which ones interest you the most. If you want to claim an issue yourself to solve, it is important that this issue is not already assigned to someone. You can see this if there is an icon in the column assigné next to the issue. If you have chosen an issue that interests you, you can open it and leave a comment field in which you indicate that you would like to claim that issue and ask to assign you. Shortly after you leave this comment on an issue, a maintainer will assign you And this will be done by one of the 10 maintainers who are willing to deliver a better version of the CLI for Microsoft every day. I had the honor of working with these individuals for several months already, and I have to say they're all very nice personalities to work with. This is one of the reasons why I chose the CLI for Microsoft 365 open source project. This open source project is very lively, in my opinion, and you get so much appreciation for what you do. So I would like to thank the maintainers for all the great work that they do every day. What types of issues are there that you can take to solve? Well, there are actually great 4 types. The first one is the new command, usually proposed by one of the maintainers. A new command is always quite straightforward because it is always discussed with the whole community before a new command is opened to be solved. In addition, a new command lists the different options that belong to the command and explains what the command has to do. And sometimes it may be that an API is already documented in the issues that you can then use to display the desired result in the output of the command. So it's pretty easy. You know what to do. It's pretty straightforward. Second one is a bug that has been discovered by someone, and this person is kind enough to report this to us and create a bug for this. This one you can also take if you want to contribute. Thirdly, an issue can also be an enhancement. This means that an existing command must get a certain update. This can be a new option that needs to be added or an existing option that needs to be removed or replaced. Fourth and finally, an issue can also be a script that can be interesting to create, where that script uses the CLI for Microsoft 365 to achieve a certain goal. But I must warn you, when you want to contribute, Albert Jan Scott has already written it down on a blog post of his, and I have experienced it personally, and I quote, once the first command was done and I got my first PR approved, it did trigger a sort of addicting spark. So I ended up signing on for another one immediately. How do you write your first command? I try to show a sort of a timeline in what you have to take in mind when you want to write your first command. Well, the first thing you need to do is go to the location where the command should come in the repository. These are grouped according to the verb and then alphabetically. When you've found the right location, you create 2 files in that folder, a TS file for the actual command and a spec.ts file for the unit tests. The TS file often consists of one of the following parts: a name get function. This retrieves the name of the command. Next, a brief description of the command itself. And next to that, you can also have the default properties that must be shown when output text, separate value or markdown documentation is used. In addition, you see it on the second step here, there are also 4 possible functions in the constructor itself. You have the init options function. This function defines the options associated with the command itself. You have the init telemetry function. That's a function that collects and measures how many times an optional option is used. The mandatory option should not be added to this. Then the init validators function, where you can indicate which options should be validated. Think of an ID that can be a GUID, and where it must therefore be checked whether it's a valid GUID. And the last possible option is the init option sets. It defines the option sets like the name says. For example, if you want either the option ID or the option title is used as an option for the command, but not both at the same time. Keep in mind that these 4 functions does not always have to be used in the constructor. Eventually, after that, we are still in the .ts file. You have the function of the command itself, where you can write the logic of the command. This function has 2 variables, each time a logger variable that you can use to log data during or after executing the command, and a variable args, which contains, among other things, the options of the command together with their values. Next to the .ts file, you also have the spec.ts file for the unit testing. It is important that these tests must always ensure 100% code coverage, since the CLI for Microsoft 365 is satisfied with nothing less. Writing this test was new to me and created a learning curve, but I have to say that I have benefited a lot from Martin Linkstool's blog, where he explains in a clear way how to best write these tests and what each command does in such a test. So check out his blog if you want to write unit tests for the CLI. Last but not least is the documentation. That is also very important, because this documentation is used to have a clear documentation database on the CLI for Microsoft 365 website. The documentation is housed in the docs folder of the repository, also arranged according to their verb and then alphabetically. The documentation consists of an .md file. It is also important that this documentation is included in the table of contents, and you do this by adding the paths to the mkeydocs.yml file. That is the information that is really important when you want to make your first contribution. Once you've done with creating your command or enhancement or whatever, and you've checked everything, you can commit and publish your branch to your fork in GitHub. After that, you go to your GitHub fork and create a new pull request. By creating a pull request, you indicate that you want to merge certain pieces of code with the main code of the CLI. Of course, you cannot do this directly, but via pull request, you allow the maintainers to do this for you. In the title of the pull request, you give a short description, for example, adds command or enhances command, followed by the command, its name itself, and closed with a hashtag followed by the 4 digits of the issue. You do the same in the description field with a slightly longer explanation added with any remarks if there are any. And in the description too, you have to write the hashtag with the 4 digits of the issue. So in this way, you allow the PR to be linked to the issue. Once the pull request has been created, you wait until one of the maintainers feels called to check your PR. When checking your PR, they will check whether or not there are improvements or errors in it. If this is the case, they will request changes to your PR and convert your pull request in draft modus. You can then solve these changes, mark every change as resolved, and when you're done, you can mark your PR as ready for review. Once the maintainers find that your pull request is complete, they will approve it and merge it with the main code of the CLI shortly afterwards. The nice thing is that you are not only appreciated for what you do for the CLI for Microsoft 365, you're also involved, and that's a nice one. Because one of my first commands I wrote was the Power Platform card get, which will display the data of an adaptive card from the Power Platform. Even though an adaptive card is part of the Power Platform, it uses the dynamic 365 platform, and the API to get an adaptive card is therefore also part of the Dynamics 365. And because I had done something about Dynamics 365, I was suddenly tagged by Albert Jan Scott out of nowhere in another issue with the question if I also knew something about data first table rows, because they also use the Dynamics 365 platform. And to be honest, I had no experience with these APIs, but I was interested in figuring it out, and I did. And by the fact that I researched this, I have created other insights and learned a lot about these parts of Microsoft 365. And that's what I like, to figure things out, to learn, and to step out of my comfort zone. Because this way, I think you can become a better developer. So thank you for listening. If you're interested in contributing for the CLI for Microsoft 365, do not hesitate to contact us. By the way, we also have a very nice Discord where you can join, ask questions, follow our changes. On this Discord, there's also a very cool guy named Parker Bot who tries to thank each contributor in an original way when your pull request is merged.
Excellent. Thank you, Nico, on that one. Really, really cool stuff. Awesome.